Remember, like the world pre-pandemic feels like a lifetime ago, you know?
Hmm.
And it wasn't just all the sourdough starter stuff, was it? It's like the pandemic um, got to act like a giant magnifying glass, right? Over how power really works in society. Like it exposed all these cracks and tensions we'd been ignoring for, well, who knows how long.
Yeah, no, you're right. It really kind of like ripped the Band-Aid off those societal fault lines,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it sped things up for sure, trends that were already happening and forced us to like deal with these shifting power dynamics head on. No more pretending things were fine.
Exactly. And that's where sociologist Tiziano Palesci comes in, right?
Yeah.
So we're diving into his article, How Power and Conflict Change in a Shifting Society, which honestly, you said it yourself, it's a bit of a tough read in places.
Yeah, a bit dense.
That's what we're here for. So in a nutshell, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Well, Taleshi's main point, the thing he really hammers home, is that you can't separate power and conflict. They're two sides of the same coin. Like, fundamentally, they're intertwined in how societies work.
So it's like, what's that old saying? Where there's smoke, there's fire. But in this case, it's more like where there's power, there's always going to be some friction.
Exactly. And this is especially true right now. I mean, look around. We've got these insane technological advances, globalization shrinking our world, and all the old ways of like who has the power and how they use it. It's all changing so fast. And honestly, that creates like a ton of opportunity, but also a whole new set of conflicts.
Okay, so this sounds pretty abstract. Could you give an example of how this actually plays out in the real world?
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, the pandemic itself is like a perfect example, honestly. Think about all those arguments about lockdowns, masks, vaccines, all that.
Oh man, don't remind me. It felt like everyone had a PhD in epidemiology all of a sudden.
Right. But it wasn't just about, the actual health measures. It was really about power. Those restrictions, while sure they were supposed to be for public health, they also exposed this inherent tension. How much individual freedom are we willing to give up? And how much power are we okay with institutions having in order to, do what they think is best for everyone?
It really makes you think. Why do we follow rules or listen to leaders? Is it just because we're scared of what'll happen if we don't? Or is there something more to it?
You're getting at a really key part of Taleshi's argument here. He talks about the difference between what he calls authoritarian power and authorial power.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break that down for me.
So authoritarian power, that's the kind that's all about force, like do this or else, think dictators or even just like that one terrible boss we've all had.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had that boss.
Right. But authorial power, he says, that's different. It comes from a place of legitimacy, right? It's about being seen as deserving of influence, having people willingly listen to you because they respect you. True authority, according to Teleshi, isn't about demanding obedience. It's about earning respect.
So it's not enough to just like have the title or hold a certain position anymore. People need to believe you actually deserve to be there.
Wow. Okay. That's a big distinction. Huge. And that's a big part of why we see more and more social movements now, right? People are pushing back against institutions, demanding transparency, accountability. There's less blind acceptance of authority and way more questioning, which, is pretty interesting when you think about it.
And it's funny because when I think about all this like questioning authority and stuff, it's hard not to think about technology.
Oh, absolutely.
Because on the one hand, it's like we're more connected than ever, more informed. But then there's this whole other side of it where it's like, are we just making ourselves easier to track, more vulnerable to being manipulated? Like all that data we're creating every time we go online, it's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely a double-edged sword. And Teleshi talks about this, how technology can be both a tool for, empowerment and control, often at the exact same time. It's wild.
Wait, so you're saying my, like, unhealthy obsession with scrolling through cat videos
Huh?
is somehow empowering and making me vulnerable?
Yeah.
How does that even work?
Well, think about it this way. Social media, right? It's become this incredibly powerful tool for organizing protests, getting the word out about social injustices, stuff like that. Like we've seen these huge movements go from, zero to global in a matter of hours, sometimes even toppling governments.
Okay, yeah.
That's technology empowering individuals to challenge traditional power structures in a way that just wasn't possible before.
I see what you mean. But what about the control part? How does that factor in?
Well, the same platforms that give us a voice, right, are also collecting tons and tons of data about everything we do online. Every click, every article you spend a little too long reading, it all gets packaged up into this digital footprint that companies and governments can use for all sorts of things. Targeted advertising, surveillance, even political manipulation.
So me joining this podcast to learn something new is both me like actively engaging with information and like a data point for some algorithm somewhere to analyze and profit from.
Exactly. Taleshi nailed it when he said it's like having a microphone in your pocket and a megaphone in your hand. It's incredibly empowering, but also potentially really exposing all at the same time.
Wow, that's a lot to process. This is definitely making me think twice about how much time I spent staring at my phone.
Yeah.
So where does this all leave us? I mean, what does the future hold for power and conflict in a world that feels like it's changing faster than ever? It can feel kind of overwhelming, right? Like we're talking about these massive shifts in power, but how does this actually play out in our everyday lives? Like what can we even do about it?
Yeah, I hear you. It's easy to feel kind of powerless when you look at the big picture. And you're right. Taleshi doesn't exactly give us a crystal ball to see the future, but he stresses that as societies evolve, so do the ways we experience power, how we use it, even how we resist it. It's not static. It's always changing. New forms of authority will keep popping up, and with them, new forms of resistance.
So it's not just about presidents and politicians or like CEOs and big corporations anymore. Power is more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It's everywhere. It's woven into all our daily interactions, our relationships, our workplaces, even those little seemingly insignificant choices we make every day.
Huh, okay. I never thought about it like that.
And that's what I find so insightful about Taleshi's work. He's encouraging us to be more aware, to question our assumptions, to try and see things from different perspectives. Because once you start to recognize those subtle ways power operates, you can navigate those dynamics more effectively. It's almost like you unlock this whole new level of understanding.
It's like suddenly you realize you've been playing checkers this whole time, but everyone else is playing 3D chess.
Yeah.
And now you're finally in on the game.
That's a great way to put it. So yeah, as you go about your day, think about those subtle power dynamics at play in your own life. How can understanding them help you in your relationships, in your career, in just finding your place in the world? It's not about getting obsessed with power itself. It's about awareness, being more conscious, and ultimately feeling more empowered to actually make a difference.
That's a really great point to end on.
Mm.
It's not just about understanding how power impacts us, but also how we can impact the power dynamics around us.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, but only if you choose to use it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to you, our amazing listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the crazy, complex, always changing world of power and conflict. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.